this video, we'll see how to use snapping tools in ANSYS Icepak. So I have a typical Icepak model with some Icepak primitives in it, some blocks, some network objects, a board, some fans, and a simple heatsink. And I want to change the dimensions of these objects using the snapping tools. For that, I can select any of the objects here and use these orange buttons to change the dimensions of that object. For example, if I want to change the dimensions of this object here, I can press Shift and then left click on one of the edges of that box, and that box will be highlighted in the graphics window as well as in the model tree. I can then use these snapping tools. For that, I can change the selection from start length to start end, and then I want to move this edge here so that it is coincident with this edge here. For that, I can choose XE and then click on this edge here, and now that edge has been moved so that it is coincident with the top edge. Similarly, I can change the dimension of this block here, so I can press Shift and then left click on the edge of that particular object, and I want to move this edge here to be coincident with this edge. So for that, I can go back to start length and make it start end and select YE. So I will click on YE and click on this edge here. So the dimension of that object is now changed. Similarly, you can find errors in the model. For example, in this case, if there is a tiny gap between the board and the components that sit on top of the board, you can modify the thickness of the board so that they are now touching each other. For that, I can go to the board here in the tree, or I can select the board using the Shift left mouse button technique. Now I want to change the thickness of the board in the positive Z direction. For that, I can click on Z end here and then click on one of the edges of the components so that the top of the board is now coincident with the bottom edges of those components. Similarly, I can also modify circular components such as these fans. For example, if I want to move the fan in the lateral directions so that the center of this fan is coincident with one of these edges here, I can use the snapping tools to do that. For that, I can change the view orientation of this model so that I can go to the Z axis here, and this is my fan, and I want the center of this fan to be coincident with this edge here. So I can go to that fan by pressing Shift and then left click on that particular edge of the fan, and here you will see X center, Y center, and Z center. I want to change the Y center because that is the lateral movement direction of the fan. So I will click on Y center and then click on this particular edge here so that the center of the fan is coincident with this edge of the heatsink. Now it has moved a very tiny amount, 0.5 millimeters. So that is how you can change the dimensions of a given object or move a given object to a new location using snapping tools. These snapping tools are also available for assemblies. For example, if I want to put these 4 DDR blocks in a given assembly, I can select all of them, right click, and then create new assembly. I can double click on the assembly in the model tree and then go to meshing tab and then click on mesh separately. That will activate all the snapping tools as shown here. I want to change the slack settings of this assembly. So I can put in some dummy values for now. So let's say 1 millimeter and then click update. But I'm not happy with the slacks that I have put for this assembly. And I want to use some slack values where the edges of this assembly are coincident with some of the edges of the objects. For example, if I want the slack settings for max Y, that is this edge here, to be coincident with the cabinet boundary here, I can click on max Y and then click on this cabinet boundary here so that the edge of the assembly snaps with the edge of the cabinet. Similarly, other settings can be modified as well. And then you can click update and done to close the panel. So the snapping tools help us in getting the dimensions correct easily instead of you having to calculate the dimensions yourself and then putting in the numbers for the objects. It also helps in preventing mesh bleeding, where tiny gaps between objects can lead to mesh bleeding in the entire model. So that was it for this demo. Stay tuned for more Icepak videos, and thanks for watching.